believed in the middle of the 20th century that human affairs were being watched keenly and closely by intelligences greater than man's. Yet, across the gulf of space on the planet Mars, intellects vast and cool and unsympathetic regarded our Earth with envious eyes, slowly and surely drawing their plans against us.
Welcome to Paranormal Road. I'm David.
And I'm Randy.
Oh, how I love that H.G. Wells introduction, War of the Worlds. Oh, I just love the intro in that book. Intellects vast and cool and unsympathetic regarded our Earth with envious eyes, slowly and surely drawing their plans against us. Randy, how could you not love that? That is like such incredible writing. I just love it.
Calm down, David.
Yeah, you gotta admit it's great, though.
Yeah.
All right, folks, if you haven't guessed by now, tonight on our show, we're going to be talking UFOs. And tonight's featured guest is Ohio-based UFO investigator William Haddix, founder and sole investigator for the Central Ohio Ufo Reporting Center.
This should really be interesting, talking with the UFO investigator.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it. I'm kind of curious to see how he investigates sightings and talk with them concerning some of his cases.
When we were researching tonight's show, we were surprised to discover how many famous people believe in aliens. We thought it would be fun to share a few of these well-known celebrities and their beliefs. Winston Churchill penned an 11-page essay on alien life in 1939. In his essay, he says, "I, for one, am not immensely impressed by the success we are making of our civilization here, that I am prepared to think we are not the only spot in this immense universe which contains living, thinking creatures."
Actress Gillian Anderson is best known for playing FBI Special Agent Dana Scully on the hit sci-fi series The X-Files. I had such a crush on her. She was just amazing. And
move on, David.
All right. Well, another thing about her is my kids, when they were little, they could not go to bed if I was watching the X-Files because the music scared them. But anyway, according to Gillian, the universe is obviously vast, and the thought that we are the only planet full of living beings doesn't make sense.
In an interview with GQ, pop star Katy Perry spoke out about her wide range of beliefs. "I see everything through spiritual lens. I believe in aliens. I look up into the stars and imagine how self-important we to think that we are the only intelligent life form."
The most recognizable face of the Star Trek franchise, actor William Shatner, says, "There is no doubt that there is life out there. The mathematics of it leads you to it, that absolute conclusion. In my mind, there is no doubt that the universe teems with life in all of its forms."
Nick Jonas, in an interview with the British talk show The Morning, told of his own close encounter. "I was in my backyard in LA and I looked up at the sky and saw 3 flying saucers. I looked at my friend and said, 'Are you seeing this, or am I losing my mind?'"
Well, there you have it, folks. There's just a few famous celebrities, that well-known people that have stated publicly their beliefs in aliens or flying saucers. But did you know that, Randy, Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan, both as presidents, believed in aliens and talked quite publicly on some occasions about them, which I think is pretty cool.
I didn't know that, David.
Yeah, isn't that neat? Yeah, it's a side note. Well, these famous people are not alone in their beliefs, though. Did you know that in a Roper poll commissioned by the Sci-Fi Channel, 66% of Americans say they think there are other forms of intelligent life in the universe? 48%, almost half, of Americans say they believe that UFOs have visited the Earth in some form over the years. I mean, almost half of the population, or if that's a representation of the full, population of the United States. 12% said they or someone else they know has seen a UFO at close range, and 2% said they've had an encounter with an alien. I find that amazing.
Well, I suppose I fall in that 12% category then.
Wait a minute, wait, say what? So you've seen a UFO?
I believe I have.
Wow, you've never told me or the team about that. Why not?
Well, I guess I didn't think it was something that I needed to share with everybody since I wasn't exactly sure until after this show.
Well, since we're doing a show on flying saucers, UFOs, and tell the story.
Oh, well, all right, if everybody wants to hear it.
Yeah, I'm sure they do.
All right. Well, it started leaving from home, going to work in the morning. It was just barely starting to be a little bit light out. It was early. I pulled out of the subdivision here where I live, and I'm only a block off of the lake. So I pull out to actually Lake Road, turn west, and when I turn west, I see just what appeared to me to be the moon, but it was gigantic. It was just huge above the trees, and it was orange. So I at first just kind of didn't pay a whole lot of attention, other than I thought it was odd that the moon be so large. And just in the blink of an eye, it was gone. I didn't see it go. I didn't see it shoot away. I didn't hear anything. But when it was gone, I could actually see the moon in the sky, and it was not orange at all.
Was it smaller than the other object?
Much smaller, and at a very far away distance.
How long ago was this?
I would guesstimate it to be about 8 years ago.
Oh, I'm surprised you never said anything about it.
Well, I don't share everything with everybody, especially when I think I might be considered crazy for bringing it up.
And I rest my case, and that's what I was trying to get you to say. This goes back to what I've said in the other episodes, that our society has been conditioned that we don't talk about stuff that's weird or strange out of fear of being ridiculed or laughed at.
And that's why we're here.
And that's the whole purpose, folks, behind Paranormal Road. We want people to be not afraid to tell their story. We want people to, if you hear someone telling of an unusual story, don't make them feel like they're crazy or nuts, just because you may not have experienced something. But I've said this before, I think this goes back to a long orchestrated through press and media and government. I think we've been conditioned to not talk about it because in that way we've been conditioned that we'll be laughed at. So these strange and unusual things, be it UFOs, be it a Sasquatch, be it whatever it may be, people just don't talk about it because you're going to get laughed at. And I think that's a shame.
It is, and I don't want to say I felt like I would be so laughed at as much as I felt like I wasn't sure of what it was either. And I didn't really want to just bring up a conversation talking about, this huge orange thing I saw in the sky, because at that particular time it didn't seem like something of interest to me. But now with what we do, and,
right,
in particular tonight with this show, this is a perfect time for me to talk about it, and hopefully people will share their stories too.
I would think too, though, that if you see something like that, taking the fear out of being laughed at and ridiculed, if people can just open up and talk, that night 8 years ago or 10 years ago, whenever you saw that, if you would have talked about it to a few people the next day without fear of being laughed at, it would have been incredible if someone said, I saw it too, but we don't talk about these things because we don't want to be laughed at. Did you look in the paper or in the next couple of days, or kind of pay attention to the news just to see if anything was said about it?
I don't remember looking through. I think I might have just, kind of Googled it up to see if there was anything in the newspaper, but I don't recall there was.
It's, like I said, it's pretty sad that we as a society keep people from talking about it. And that's why I'm kind of excited about talking to our guest tonight, because going out and doing research on UFOs and actually trying to help people understand what they saw, I think is really cool. But do you know anybody else who has seen UFOs or?
Well, I have a friend that I used to work with that lives also right on the lake, a little bit further west than here. And her husband both kind of experienced something that they weren't sure about. They did see something, like around their house that went out over the lake.
So on Lake Erie.
Right. It started
on land?
Right. It started near them or near land. And they were so intrigued by it that they got in the car and actually ran, down by the lake to see if they could see more. And I believe that what she told me is that they did actually see something hovering out over the lake also.
Did she talk about it being submersible, like it went underwater or came out of the water, or was it just
I don't think
too far out?
Yeah, I don't think she could see it clearly because she said at first they thought it was a boat.
Yeah.
But why would it be in the air and then a boat?
Yeah, because there's been a lot of reports of UFOs over the Great Lakes. I know in Chicago, in the Chicago area, there was a famous one not too many years ago. Oh, maybe it is now. I guess I'm old. I want to say about 8 years ago, maybe, when you had your sighting of a round disc object that actually was hovering over the airfield, and it was causing quite an alarm because they had the incoming jets, for landing. But it then they watched it for quite some time, and then it shot straight up in the sky at speeds that were just incredible and looked like this ring through the clouds as it shot up. There also was a sighting in Cleveland of a metallic ball-like object that hovered around the terminal tower, and that was, I want to say, about 6 years ago. That was all over the news. I know they've been seen along Lake Erie. But a lot of those, in all fairness, in some cases, a lot of the mistaken as UFOs are jets coming into Hopkins with their landing lights on. And from a distance, it looks like they're not moving because you're getting a straight-on view of this jet. So it looks like this bright light, but it just looks like it's not moving. So it's, and that's kind of cool, again, when we talk to William tonight about how he deciphers and determines these type of, I guess, people that misidentify something as UFO when there's a logical explanation for it.
He seemed sincere about the way he handles cases and his interest in getting the truth.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be important for someone who had an experience to reach out to an investigator that's not going to say, "Oh, you saw a UFO," right away, or "Oh, it must be alien," or that's someone that's very thorough and non-biased. I think that's what I would want if I had an experience like that.
Mm-hmm. And he seems pretty straight up, and he's willing to help people understand what they've seen and experienced. Well, Dave, you put me on the spot tonight. Now it's your turn.
Well, I really didn't want to bring it up because I don't want our listeners to think that we've experienced every type of paranormal event there is. But I did see something in the 80s. It was about 1987. At the time, I was married. That was BC years, before children. But my wife and I at the time were living on the lake between Vermilion and Huron, and it's kind of funny because I think it's the same area.
It is. It's less than a mile from where my friends encountered something too.
Yeah. We were, again, there were two apartments that sat back. Teresa, who was my wife at the time, she was a manager for a gas station, and she had to get up early in the morning, be there every morning around 4 o'clock in the morning. I had a business meeting to attend to, and I kind of overslept. So when I woke up, she was already gone, which is not unusual, but it was about maybe 5 in the morning. And I looked at the clock and I had to rush because I had to meet somebody at the office because we were going to Toledo for a seminar. But it was a business meeting seminar. But So I jumped in the shower and I hurried up and got dressed, and I ran out the door. And as I'm walking to my car, there was a long walkway to where the parking lot was. I see this massive, is the only way I can describe it, triangle shaped object that had lights all over it, made zero sound whatsoever. And as I'm walking to my car, it's not registering what I'm seeing. I'm seeing just this massive triangle with lights all over it. And in the center is this like red half dome object or ball or whatever that was pulsating. And from the west, there came 3 or 2 lights real fast, like balls of light. They went up inside. And again, nothing is registering as to what I'm seeing. I stop and I put the key in the car and I'm just kind of staring at it. I get the car door open and all that I'm thinking is I'm going to be late. I have to meet Bob at the office. So I got in, started the car, backed up, headed down the drive, and I can still see it. And I kind of stopped before I turned on Route 6, and I'm looking at it. And again, it's still not registering what I'm seeing. So I'm like, I got to hurry up. And so I turned right. And after I drove about a mile or 2, all of a sudden, terror. I mean, it was like, speaking of War of the Worlds, I was thinking, all that ran through my mind is that something in the back seat of my car was going to touch me. It's like I got freaked. And it was at that moment I realized what I saw could not have been from this earth. It was just massive. No sound whatsoever. And I have no idea what it was. Even though I was running late, I stopped at the gas station where my wife worked. She wasn't quite open yet, but I knocked on the door and she let me in. I said, save a newspaper. And I told her what I saw, and I said, but I got to run. So that night, she saved the newspaper. There was nothing in it. I was convinced that people on Route 2 or the Turnpike would have seen this. I watched the news, waiting to see if it was brought up on the news. Nothing. And I was just like, this is impossible. People, even though it was early in the morning, there were people that had to have seen this thing. It was so massive. So about 2 years later, this is AC now, after children. My daughter Megan was born and a baby, but we moved to Lorraine, and I'm watching Unsolved Mysteries, and they bring up the Tri-State Triangle, and I'm like, I can't believe this. It sounds very similar to what I witnessed, and it happened in the 80s, that this ship was seen a lot over New York, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. So, yeah, I don't know if that's it or not, but it was incredible.
Well, your story's much better than mine, David.
Well, I'm sorry. I didn't want to bring it up. But I don't know what I saw. I just, at the time, I still think that it was not from this earth because it was too big. It was just massive, no sound.
That's why we want people to call in and tell us things, that they've seen. We just told you what we saw, whether, people think we're crazy or not. If you saw something, let us know.
Yeah. And on that note, we're coming up on break. But when we return from break, we're going to be speaking with William Haddix of Central Ohio UFO Reporting Center. And welcome back to Paranormal Road. As promised, tonight our guest is William Haddix, who is an Ohio-based UFO investigator, and we have him on the line now. How you doing, William?
Hey, William.
Doing pretty good.
How are you? Good?
Doing good.
Good.
Hey, William, if you could kind of maybe give our listeners and audience a little bit of background about yourself, how you came into the interest of UFO investigating, and and basically your background bio.
Sure. I've been doing it on my own for the past about 3 years, but I've always had an interest in UFOs or really anything astronomy related ever since I was a kid. You know, I've looked through the telescopes and things and always just fascinated with how much was out there, and I just never really believed that we were the only thing, with life on it. The Earth was the only planet. The countless, stories and reports, whether private or government related, and it just seemed like too much evidence that something had to be going on.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of my main goal was if somebody wanted to take the time to fill out a report, then I wanted to do my best to give them, an answer. I'm not necessarily trying to debunk or really prove anything one way or another, just to tell people what they saw.
Basically to research and just, find out what the truth is. Is that how you go at it?
Exactly. And with all the technology and internet and things makes it, I don't want to say easier, but more convenient would be a way to put it, where I don't have to actually travel to locations as a lot of investigators in the past would have to do.
Right.
Now we can get photos and got flight radars and all the different things that are out there that I use, and it just makes it pretty nice. And a lot of times I can solve a case if I got enough information relatively quick, but I still like to spend 2 or 3 days sometimes to put something together, whether it be a video or pictures or whatever it takes, so that I can actually prove it to a witness. I don't want them to take my word for it. I'm just a guy doing this, and, who's to say my word's any good?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to have proof that they can look at and say, yes, this is what I saw and it matches, and that's what I've done on just about every case I've had, and it's worked out just fine.
So just kind of like peace of mind to the people who really aren't too sure what they did see.
Correct. I've never had anybody, call or email or anything that's saying, oh, I saw an alien craft or this or that. It's just, I saw something that I can't explain. Could you help me figure it out?
Mm-hmm.
And they like the peace of mind. They don't really care, what it is. If it's 747 jumbo jet and I can prove it, that's fine with them, or a planet or star.
Mm-hmm.
It really doesn't matter. They just want that curiosity, filled. That we all have a curiosity. It's just human nature.
Right.
And they like to know what it is. So that's what I try my best to do.
I think that's great. How long have you been doing this, William?
On my own, it's been about 3 years. I've been involved off and on with other groups and things in the past, and, not putting down other groups, but most organizations, even ones that I have not been affiliated with, but talked to others that have, always kind of had an unwritten rule that I didn't like, which was, if you submit a report and we can figure out what you saw, we were never allowed to tell you.
What do you think that is?
Whether it was, didn't matter what it was. And the reason that I was always given from others was, well, if this person thinks that it's definitely an alien thing, and here I am telling them it's a star or a planet like Venus or something, then they're going to get mad, retaliate, and we're going to have problems. And I've never once ran into that. I've never had anybody even remotely, want to get hostile because I told them what it was. They were just happy that I was able to figure it out. And I always thought if I did run into something that I thought could be that way, then I'll just email them the answer and be done with it. I've never had anything even remotely come close to where I thought that was going to happen.
Right, to just give them the truth and let them accept it.
Right, and that's why I like to give them the proof along with it. You can debate me all day long, but when you've got it right there in front of you with proof in video or photos or whatever I put together, there's nothing to argue.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey, William, a Gallup poll that was conducted said that about 12% of the population either they or they know someone who has had a close encounter or have seen a UFO up close. Do you find that to be true as far as the volume-wise? Is there any type of patterns of calls or contacts that you get?
Mostly from my personal experience, from people I've talked to over the years and things, that seems to be fairly accurate.
Mm-hmm.
Most researchers and organizations, they tend to think that of all the cases and things we hear about, around 85 to 90% are explainable. It's that extra 10% that's kind of still up in the air, but they also figure that only about 10% of actual sightings are ever reported anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it comes down to that fear factor of being ridiculed, so, I think people are hesitant to report that.
I agree, and I also think that that is part of the reason a lot of the shows you see on TV are coming up more frequently. They've got Project Blue Book on the History Channel currently.
Yeah.
And I think that's doing two things. It's conditioning people to get UFOs to be kind of something that you're not even going to take a second glance at. Oh, okay, it's there.
Mm-hmm.
It is what it is. But on the same time, they focus heavily on not just the story, but the negative side of it. You got people following the guy around, breaking into his house, dealing with his wife, intimidation.
Right.
So it's getting people used to it in a sense of the government will tell you what you need to know. You people stay out of it. That's how I kind of look at it. They don't want the public to really do too much. They just want us to be able to accept anything they tell us on the subject and just not question it and let it go.
Right.
And anytime somebody does question it, in those kind of programs, you see all the retaliation. And I think that still, stays in people's mind that, I better believe what I'm told, but not add anything to it.
William, I've got to believe that there are some cases that maybe you've been involved in that were just really compelling. There was just something about them that maybe you thought were unusual, or maybe that you didn't feel real comfortable that you had the right answer. Do you have anything like that you can share with us?
Yes, I do. And nothing really isolate to a specific instance, but in the last couple years, 2016 and 17 mainly, in November in my area, I'm in Pickaway County, Ohio,
mm-hmm.
There was a wave of sightings over about a 4-day period each year, and military was involved, because I saw the military helicopters and they were doing some training, but I'm on the very northern edge of their training zone. They basically just pass through here when they're going south. And people were reporting numerous different crafts. I saw a lot of flare drops, which I contacted the base, which was the 180th Fighter Wing out of Toledo. And they had informed me that, yes, we dropped flares because it's a safety concern, or we're not allowed to land with the flares in case there's a problem. We don't have that big fire risk, which makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But they also claimed that they would not drop anything like that over a populated area. And these were definitely over a populated area. It was right over town, over the main highway, US 23. I'd had local law enforcement tell me that they had actually witnessed it. There was one witness that I never got a chance to speak with, but I did read her story, and it was during the same time frame, same location. She was working at a factory and went outside. I guess it was before her shift, or either that or a lunch break. I'm not exactly sure, but it was after dark anyhow. And she was standing in the parking lot with a friend, and they said they saw a craft come over the field that was, they estimated, probably a half-acre wide.
Wow.
And only about 150 foot off the ground. She said she could have hit it with a rock in her statement.
Well, William, you mentioned law enforcement, and I'm curious, do you get much cooperation from law enforcement? Or do they more or less, kind of laugh it off? Or what kind of relationship do you have?
I get full cooperation with every law enforcement agency I've ever talked to. I mean, they'll actually pull in some of their officers, get a hold of them, even if it's their off day, whatever.
Yeah.
And give me 100% cooperation. I've never had any problems. If they can't answer my call right away, they'll always call me back. I've got a very good relationship with local law enforcement. I've never even once been like, they have actually appreciated it, and they've got all my information that if they get anything reported to them, they forward it to me.
That's great.
Just because they do not have time. They said they would love to do it, though. They've admitted that. They would love to be able to go out and do these investigations, but they just can't because, they're doing their own job.
Right.
But any information that I need, they've always been able to provide. So that's been
Have you ever had any of them?
As well as the military bases around here as well.
Yeah. Have you ever had any of them on the side or off the record confiding you of something they may have seen while doing patrols or out at night?
Not so much law enforcement, but military officers I have.
Oh, great. That's awesome.
And that's an interesting thing, too. This is the only instance I ever felt that something happened to where the story was silenced by military. I've had that happen in one case, and that was the biggest compelling, cover-up type thing that I had ever been involved with, and I can go into that if you want.
Yeah, please tell us about that.
Yeah, we were actually going to ask you about military cover-up, if you thought there was much military cover-up, or any kind of cover-up for that matter.
Yes, I do, to a degree. The biggest problem is when people call these bases and stuff, which it took me a little bit to learn this, but the people that generally answer the phones, they don't know what they're legally allowed to tell you. So they're not necessarily lying or covering up in every case. They just don't know what they can say.
Yeah.
So it's always best to deal with public relations, because they know what they can say and they can't say.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So when I was dealing with this wave of sightings a couple of years ago in November, I called, I was wanting to call Wright-Patterson, because they're our airspace as well. Well, I accidentally got the wrong number and called the Air Force Museum that's right in the same area.
Mm-hmm.
And the lady answers the phone, and this one surprised me. She said they refer all UFO reports to the National Weather Service. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, that makes sense, though.
Which I did confirm. But I ended up getting the right number to the base. Lady answers, and I was asking about doing a Freedom of Information Act request. And never once did I ask anything to the lady about, have you seen anything? Or, I didn't want to get into none of that with her on, because I know they're on base communication. So after a few minutes goes by and she tells me about the Freedom of Information Act, she starts going off, 100 miles an hour about her personal sightings.
Wow.
Sends me video, all this different stuff, and she really wants to keep in contact and everything, and all of a sudden, phone call dropped, all emails ceased to exist, no communications whatsoever, and even the videos that I had in my email, gone.
Wow. Yeah, I'd say that's a
They were deleted out of my email. My Yahoo mail that I had at the time, the emails were gone, no more photos, and they were very similar in lights and patterns and things that people were seeing here in November. The only difference was theirs was a month prior.
Very interesting.
Yeah, that's kind of weird.
I definitely thought so. And where the sightings are here, I popped it up on the map, and if I drew a line, a straight line, it would go from our little county airport straight to the county airport. It's not far from Wright-Patterson Air Base. It makes a complete straight line. So I don't know what it actually was. There was a lot of witnesses and things. I mean, it was to the point people were going down to Walmart and parking in the lot because they knew at 8:30 you was going to see a light show.
Well, that's pretty profound. Yeah.
You could set your watch to it, and it wouldn't last long, but it was there.
Wow.
And was there ever any explanation of what that was?
The only thing that I was ever told was just, that was our military dropping the flares, and so they could come back to base, and that was the only thing I was ever told. They said we were doing no actual training in the area. We were just flying back, and I don't know any more than that. I mean, I never could get any kind of an explanation. I do know that area has a slight history of triangle craft. There's a report from back in the 90s where some guys at the DuPont, which is just down the road from where all this happened, saw a triangle craft fly overhead late at night.
Wow.
So this area has always been a hot spot. We're actually the #1 spot in the state for UFO sighting.
I was going to ask you that.
Since the 70s when they started taking track.
Yeah, regional-wise, what areas of Ohio are hot spots?
Generally, my area, which like I said is Pickaway County, and I think a lot of that has to do with we're got the big military operations zone, and we've got 2 flight paths that intersect here. It's the 180th Fighter Wing out of Toledo, and then Wright-Patterson.
Mm-hmm.
And we've also got Rickenbacker Air Base, which is also a commercial airport now, but they do have a refueling wing and a squadron of Black Hawk helicopters. So all of that right in this area is always been the largest, but another hot spot as well is everything up north, anything bordering Lake Erie.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There has been numerous reports of craft coming out of the water, going into the water, lots of things. I've never really been involved in anything to do with that, but the only thing that I've done as far as anything north was my most recent report from a few months ago, and which is actually one that I really enjoyed investigating. It was a lot of fun. It was from Detroit, Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
And the lady was really, I don't want to say frantic, but she was highly excited, that she had saw something. Woke her up in the middle of the night. She heard some loud noise outside, which was some people playing loud music in their car. And she looks out and sees these lights in the sky and these different patterns drifting like they were going to land.
Mm-hmm.
And had no idea, she said, what it could have been. So I started doing some research, and come to find out I couldn't 100% prove it because I couldn't get a hold of the organization. But with all the evidence I had, it was a group of skydivers at night.
With lights
I found
on,
out there's a
glow
large
sticks or lights.
skydiving school in the Detroit area, and the direction that they were drifting down towards matched up with a football field to one of the local colleges there. So a perfect spot to land.
Yeah, it could have been. I've been to one of our local skydive drop zones, and they do that. They'll do like a night drop, and they'll
Right.
have those little lights and the little glow sticks and stuff. So that makes sense.
What these were, when I looked into it a little further, is the skydivers. That particular skydiving organization was actually where you could go just, something you wanted to do, or you could go and learn to be an instructor. So it was all different levels. And they put those canisters on their ankle, which keeps them from running into each other when they're falling, at night, because they really can't see.
Yeah.
So it gives them an idea where each person's at. And I showed her some different YouTube videos and things that were, the same type of event.
Mm-hmm.
And she said that was exactly what it was, and she was so thankful. And that was just an interesting one, because I wasn't 100% sure right off. So I really had to do some digging to figure it out, but I never could get a hold of the actual organization there. I don't know if they could change their phone number or what, but so I never could 100% confirm it, but with all the evidence that was there, I was 99.9% sure.
Yeah. I mean, that would be hard to not follow with something like that going on. When we were talking about cover-ups, the government cover-ups and stuff, it came to mind in the earlier talk that Dave had with you before the show, that there was something called the Forest Fire Manual, and I didn't know what that was about. Can you tell me what that's about?
Yeah, what that is there's it's called the Firefighter Training Manual, but it's a college textbook for fire science that was used back in the 90s. And I'm trying to remember the gentleman's name. I'll look it up while I'm talking, but I spoke with the author of the book, and it was just what, college kids would use for their homework.
Mm-hmm.
And chapter 13 of the book actually dealt with what to do in a UFO crash, how to handle it. If you're, let's say, the guy on duty at the fire station, and you get a UFO crashed in your area, and it goes into all the details of safety precautions. And the gentleman told me that he actually, when he wrote the book, in order to get it published and approved and all of that, it had to go through FEMA. So they obviously knew about it.
Very interesting.
And he was a professor out of University of Cincinnati.
Mm. That kind of leads
and it
you
was
to
very interesting to read. Let's see, William Kramer is the gentleman's name, and it was written in 92, but the book is actually from mid 90s. And it goes into all the details and how to track it, everything possible that could happen concerning UFOs. And when I spoke with him on the phone, he said that he was a firm believer in the UFO phenomenon, but he couldn't write the book that way. He didn't want people to think it was a personal opinion. Right. So he wrote it as a kind of a coverall that, we need to be prepared for anything that could happen.
Exactly.
Now, whether it's a large chance or a small chance, it doesn't matter. It could happen. So if it does, we need to know what to do. And that was the basis for writing it. But it's very interesting. And in the UFO community, that book has actually got like a cult following and sells for quite a bit of money nowadays.
I bet.
But it's very interesting.
That's pretty cool. And it's, at the same time, to think about that book coming out in the 90s. It's like, have we come along that much that in the 90s we believe that, we have to actually write a policy for UFO?
I think it's just more of the conditioning thing, in my opinion, getting the public more used to the subject.
Yeah. On that note, we are coming up on break, and we're going to continue with William Haddix when we return. Welcome back to Paranormal Road. William, have you personally ever had a sighting of a UFO, maybe when you were younger, or is that what may have fueled your passion for this field?
Yes, I have, and what really fueled it before I even had a sighting of my own was my grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
He was in the National Guard for about 18, 19 years. Back shortly after the Korean War times, but he was stateside.
Mm-hmm.
Still here at the same air base that's just north of me now. It was called Lockburn at the time, but it's Rickenbacker now. And he had always told the story that, well, first off, he was a staff sergeant, so he kind of played chauffeur a lot, driving the higher-ups around where they needed to go. And he was very familiar with a lot of higher-up people that others of his similar rank maybe would have not had such close interaction with. So he said one particular day they were just doing routine stuff, nothing out of the ordinary, and he actually saw a craft land on the runway, a UFO, kind of the disc, your classic disc shape. And they took it. They took it underground. I guess they've got some underground, I don't know, storage or what's exactly up there, but underground area of the base. And he said when it happened, they put out an order that anybody that lived on the base was to go to the barracks and basically block off your windows so you couldn't see what was going on. And if you didn't live on the base, if you lived somewhere else, just go home. You know, they just have kind of I don't want to say an evacuation, but you know, just don't pay attention to what we're doing.
What you're seeing
I'm
landing
not
on
really
our field.
certain how close he got. I don't think he was all that close to the object, but definitely seen it.
Wow.
And that was very odd, to say the least. And years after the fact, and I never knew if this had anything to do with it or not, but it always made me wonder. Years later, I always wondered more about his military background, because he had no records of him, you know, being in the military other than a couple photos. And I'd done a research thing through the government where you can get, you know, family members' military history, and I had all his information and unit numbers, and I had the photo, and it came back his unit didn't exist.
That's interesting.
And it took a long time before anybody ever was able to uncover some little bit of information. And our local, I think it was AMVETS, had contacted him later on, nothing to do with me, but said that they had ran across some of his records. But when I had tried it, they said that the unit didn't exist. And I thought that was very odd, you know, seeing something like he did, and now you're saying his unit don't exist?
Right.
Maybe I'm reading too much into it. I don't know, but it seemed a little odd to me.
That is strange.
So what about your story, as far as you saw something, or you may have had a personal experience?
I saw an object. This was back in about 2005, I believe. And there were other witnesses there, but nobody would ever talk about it. They just, like they didn't see it, but they had to. I was about 3 miles outside of town here. We got a lake, and we was out there at the lake and watching the lunar eclipse. So there was me, my mom and dad, and had our dog in the car, and we're watching this eclipse. It's in the summertime, and I'm looking out over the lake, and you can see the moon and everything. It's, you know, picture perfect, crystal clear night. Well, off to the left, I saw an object that was probably, I compared it to about the size of a basketball, but it looked like just a ball of fire, a glowing orb, you know, is what I would call it. And it was slowly approaching toward where the moon was, and it actually went in reverse, backed up.
Wow.
So it done that a couple times, and what made this very, very odd was I had a cell phone in my hand that would not work here whatsoever. I had got it out of state, never even had it activated. And AT&T was not really that big for phones around here at that time, so there was just no way to have service on it. And like I said, I never had it hooked up.
Yeah.
But as that object got in front of us, I got a full signal on my phone and was able to call my grandma.
That's weird.
And
it was like a large antenna.
Yes, exactly. The object gets in front and actually blocked out part of the moon, almost like an eclipse would, but it's this fireball thing. And then it continues on to the right of us, and I would say if I had to estimate, every 200 or 300 yards it would get away from me, I would lose 1 bar of signal on that phone until the phone actually got so hot I had to drop it. So I let go of it. The lights come on in the dash from Mom's car, and the keys were not even in the ignition. So after that whole experience, it was probably, I don't know, maybe a week or so later, I went south of town here, was in the Ross County, Chillicothe area, and they had an AT&T store there they had just built. So I took the phone in there, and I said, I want you to look at this. It's not acting right. So he plugs it into his computer, or however they check it, and said, I couldn't activate this phone if I wanted to. And I said, oh, is it just not covered here? He said, no. He said, there's nothing in it. There's no internal memory. It's gone. He said, it was just like it was formatted. He said, the components are there, but he equated it to putting a hard drive in your computer that has nothing on it.
Erasing
it's just not going to work. So, but in process of some moves and moving around that I had done back at that time, I wish I'd have kept track of the phone, but I had lost it in a move.
Yeah. Did any of you suffer any health effects? I mean, after that sighting, did any of you feel ill? Or?
No. We were fine. I noticed that our dog was very alert, almost put you in mind of one of them hunting dogs. You're like a pointer.
Yeah.
They're just straight as a board, tail stiff as a 2x4, just really concentrating on that, whatever that object was. And there was several other people there that night taking photos and things, but nobody would ever say anything. And I noticed one thing. I don't know if it was related to that or not, but there was a woman standing beside our car, and she ended up leaving, so I didn't get a chance to say anything to her. But she was there, I'm assuming, going to try to get some video of the eclipse.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when this object came across, all of a sudden it seemed like the battery was dead on her camera, because she was fumbling a lot with her camera, trying to get it to work.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it had anything to do with it or if it just actually died. I don't know, but it seems to me like, you know what time eclipses are. That's all common knowledge of when it's going to happen and things. You think you would have been more prepared if that was your reason for going there.
Yeah, you would think. Have you ever come across, or has anyone ever contacted you in regards to the alien abduction phenomena, or what are your thoughts on that? Or do you know of any compelling cases or thoughts here in Ohio or even the Midwest?
I haven't had anything brought to me personally, but I have talked to people when I've been with other organizations and things that have had abductions and stuff they had dealt with. And the abduction phenomenon, I guess you would say, I think, like I said, there's definitely something to it. To what degree is hard to say, but people know that it's going to be a lot of negativity brought to them, and people's going to kind of look down on them for reporting it. Yeah. So there's got to be something to it for people to even take the risk, I guess you would say, to even come forward with it.
Yeah,
and that's ridicule. Something it kind of goes back to my investigating is. That's the first question I always ask myself when I'm dealing with any case is, what does the witness have to gain from telling me this?
Right.
Yeah.
And if I could think of a reason, then that's kind of a red flag that I need to go over this with even more of a fine-tooth comb than I normally would.
I like your approach. We, as far as within the realm of paranormal investigating, that's one of the things we ask ourselves too. Excuse me. When dealing with clients, as far as truthfulness, some of the wild sometimes stories that we hear before we do an investigation, you have to wonder, okay, is this really happening, and why would they tell us this if it wasn't happening? Who would want to risk that type of exposure to these type of events or stories they're telling?
Exactly, and I've got a prime example. When I was with another organization, a case had come through, and it was a highly edited video, first off. I mean, the video is almost in HD, except for the object. It was blurry. But music and all this stuff. And come to find out, the two kids that reported it were just out of high school, and they were going to college that fall for video editing.
That wasn't a red flag.
What better group to test your skills on than somebody that's supposed to analyze that type of stuff?
Yeah.
And if you can fool a UFO group, well, that's kind of a pat on your back that, hey, you're doing a pretty good job at your editing skills.
Right.
So that's one of those examples of what do they have to gain from it.
And it
doesn't mean I'll ignore their story necessarily, but I got to look at it under, a bigger microscope.
Right. And under, that note, it's we say that or see the same thing with as far as ghost or anything that's paranormal related. Unfortunately, with the advent of CGI, people understand or learning how to use this software in many cases, which come bundled in their computers, and they're getting quite creative out there. So the hard part is you have good physical or good video evidence of something, and immediately you have, well, it's too good, it's a hoax. You get something that's blurry, and immediately you get people saying, well, why are these always blurries? It's a hoax. So it's very
Exactly.
difficult with video or pictures. It's open to so much criticism. It's almost like, you're never going to please, everybody. It's always going to be open to interpretation.
I agree. There's even a lot of apps nowadays that I've seen where you can download to just put a ghost in your photo,
Right.
put a UFO in your picture.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and we could spot those a mile away.
And I look at a lot of the stuff that I run across online, and I actually try to figure out sometimes how they've done it. And I've actually seen where people have figured out some to where you'll see somebody going down the road. We had a case like this here a few years ago. Some people going down the road and they see this blurry object up in the sky. Well, it was edited. That blurry thing was they edited it after the fact, and that was a drop of water out of an eyedropper. That makes it appear that it's going to just come out.
Right.
But a lot of things, like that. But everything that's been sent personally to me, though, there hasn't been anything that was hoax related or anything of that sort. It's all been just, this is what I've got information-wise. Can you help me out? And I take it from there. Nobody's really cared what it was. They just want to know what it is. They weren't really too concerned if it was alien or airplane or whatever. They just wanted that curiosity, filled. They just wanted to know. So that's what I try to do.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you get you have your work cut out for you. How often do you have to actually go out in the field? I mean, do you use Geiger counters? Do you check radiation, land?
Very rarely do I ever have to really go out anywhere, just for the fact of people are generally given too much time before they actually report it.
Right.
And so there's really not a whole lot to go. And I haven't personally had anything as of yet where any craft have actually landed as far as anything I couldn't figure out.
Gotcha. And how do you go? I mean, take our listeners through some of the steps that you use to triangulate or figure out what are the various resources you use to try to debunk, or I hate using that term, but try to explain what a witness may have seen.
I got two main things that I use depending on what the report is. One I use is called Stellarium, and basically what that is in the program I can put in a location and any date I want. I can go back as far as I want or as far in the future as I want. It doesn't matter. And set up the night sky for that area. And with all the different filters it has, it'll make the stars that twinkle, whatever satellites are buzzing by at that particular moment.
Nice.
And you can look at it in real time or speed it up. And I use that a lot when they're send me anything that I think could be a star or a planet, and I can match up the timing with what's showing on my screen, and generally they're pretty close. Now, if it's a craft of some sort, then I use there's a few different ones, but they're flight radars online, and you can go back and look and see exactly what was flying over your area, or that area, at that particular time. And even if it's military or whatever, they'll still show up.
Gotcha.
So I use both of those more than anything else.
Have you had a case that you were where you actually had multiple people call you on the same incident?
Just the ones from the past Novembers. There were several people that called in asking and wondering what it was. Even law enforcement, asking, hey, if you figure this stuff out, let us know. We're curious too. I've always been kind of surprised in a way of how willing that different agencies are to cooperate and actually try to help me out.
Honestly,
they really appreciate it.
That surprises me. I would have thought you'd get the rolling eyes, or you'd get the more or less the brush off by highway patrol or even the military. I'm kind of surprised that you get such good cooperation, which...
They like the fact that there's someone that they can refer somebody to so that they don't have to handle it and they don't have the public, screaming at them for answers 24/7 when they can just pass it off to someone like myself and then they can kind of be done with it because they don't have the manpower.
Right, that makes sense.
So they, other than their own general curiosities, I think they just want to keep me on their good side, so I'm willing to kind of help them out if need be.
William, can you share with some of our listeners maybe some of in cases in the Midwest, even the United States, that you find fascinating? And they don't have to be cases that you were involved in directly, but cases that you have reviewed or are aware of that you feel are very compelling to that poll of Americans who believe that we've been visited.
Sure. There's two main cases that I've always liked, other than the Roswell one, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But that's always kind of the big one.
Right.
But the biggest one that I've looked into, and I mean, a lot of information's out there, and this was back in the late 90s, and that was the Phoenix Lights over Arizona.
Yes, yeah.
And there was thousands of witnesses. They, estimated that thing traveled, over 300 miles. And even the governor of Arizona at that time had he had stated he wished he hadn't have done this after the fact. But he had a press conference and actually said, yeah, we know what it is, and we're going to bring in the one that we have in custody. And it was one of his staff members dressed up in an alien costume. And that really upset a lot of people. There was a big outrage. I mean, there were people trying to get him thrown out of office for it.
Yeah, because it's making fun of them.
They felt so ridiculed.
Yeah, exactly.
And they liked the guy beforehand.
Yeah, it's
but
exactly.
After it was all over with, ridiculed. And years later, he came out publicly and said, there was more to it than that. I wished I hadn't have done that.
Didn't he at one point admit that
I didn't know what else to do?
Didn't he at one point admit that he either saw the lights himself or was very curious about it, but
yes,
yeah, he just did that to try to calm down the hysteria or something.
And there's another case that's not as well known, but is one of my favorite ones. It doesn't have as many witnesses, and this is from back in 1957. The dates are a little sketchy, but it's 57, and it deals with President Dwight Eisenhower.
Mm-hmm.
This was Holloman Air Force Base out in New Mexico. And the way the story goes is there's one photo that shows kind of an object in the sky, which could have been about anything.
Mm-hmm.
But the way the story goes is Eisenhower was there, his plane landed, and a UFO landed at the same time. This was all pre-planned out. One of his staff members, I guess, was in contact with this craft, and it landed. Eisenhower boarded the craft and ended up making a treaty with the extraterrestrial.
I've heard that
what
story.
What that treaty was supposed to be is they were going to give us some of their technology as long as they could abduct a human every once in a while. and shortly after, we got a huge boom in technology. It was one of the biggest technology increases, in mankind. NASA, started doing all their stuff shortly after.
Mm-hmm.
All kinds of just huge technology advances. And there was also an increase in abduction reports after that time period.
It's funny. I mean, I don't say funny. I actually heard that story, and I'm not sure where I heard it or read it, something of that nature. But, yeah.
So it's supposed to be I guess they call it like an intergalactic treaty that was signed.
Yeah.
That they could have a human once in a while, and we would get some of their technology. And if there's anything to it, I really can't say for sure, other than there was an increase in reports of, like I said, abductions, as well as our big increase in technology. So it kind of goes together.
Given the explosion of people claiming that they've been abducted by UFOs, sounds like somebody's breaking that treaty and getting a little bit greedy. So.
Well, as far as, of course, you'll never know any details exactly, but it didn't really say that there was any limits, as far as I've ever heard, of how many they can take. It kind of said once in a while, but what does actually once in a while mean? That's open for interpretation.
Exactly.
So,
there's a few people I'd like to volunteer to be abducted.
All right. Well, we are coming up on break, so we're going to take a break, and we will return. And welcome back to Paranormal Road. William, there's a question that tonight I've had in the back of my mind to ask you. Have you ever witnessed or had any of people that have been calling into you their reports, stories of the Men in Black?
Not personally, but I do wonder at times, because I know with technology now, and you've got agencies like the NSA and all of that, and we know we've heard all their type of stuff about listening in on phone calls and things. And there have been numerous occasions where, well, just like during the show, have technical difficulties. My calls have been dropped, or but I never lose signal on the phone. Things of that sort. I've had my phone restart a few times when talking to witnesses. So very odd that when I would get on that subject that I ran into those kind of glitches. And like I said earlier, with the lady from the air base that I talked to, I looked for quite a while, and the emails that she had sent me with the videos on it were no longer in my email, and I knew I didn't delete them.
Right, all vanished.
Where they went, I don't know. But I always kind of wonder. I think Men in Black nowadays is more of a digital thing, because they can do a lot more suppression and intimidation digitally through the internet and things, so they don't have to be out quite as much as what you used to see or hear about in the past, or knocking on people's doors, threatening them not to say anything, kind of the classic story. I don't think they have to go quite to those links, at least not as often.
Yeah, I think with the internet and what's out there in surveillance and equipment that, we don't have to see anybody. We know they're watching anyway.
Exactly. And they can, instead of making you disappear, so to speak, they can do just as much, if not more damage, by just messing with your online life. Right? We all got kind of two sides to us.
Or even your financial
personal life
ability.
And your online.
Right.
And the online one, if it were to disappear, that can mess with people a lot more sometimes than anything else.
Yeah.
How's the UFO community? We hear as far as the Bigfoot community, we understand that there's a lot of infighting within that community as far as belief systems. How does the UFO community, as far as investigators and the like, what's the atmosphere like there?
A lot of, I don't know what the correct term to use, but nobody really wanting to let a lot of stuff be solved. A lot of places like to keep the same story, just keep dragging them along, even when there's enough evidence to kind of put that case to rest. And there's also a lot of infighting as far as, everybody's wanting to take credit for whatever the discovery is, or the piece of evidence that they was able to confirm or debunk. Everybody's wanting to take credit for it. Instead of working together for a common goal, everybody's wanting that big recognition.
I kind of suspected that that's probably what it'd be like, because we see that in the paranormal community. I hear it's like that in the Bigfoot community. Now in the UFO, it's amazing how humans, our ego gets in the way.
And I've noticed that that's become more and more prevalent with all the TV shows that are out there, because everybody's in the back of their mind hoping they can cash in on this.
Yeah. And
you know, it's kind of a cash cow, so to speak.
Right.
And there is a lot of money that can be made off the subject, and that's especially UFO types, because in reality, if you've got a good enough story and can go to these conferences and stuff, you can make some very good money and really don't have to prove a thing.
Right. Just get up there if you're a good speaker. Yeah.
A good speaker, and that's completely it.
So
that's kind of the downside to it, I would say.
Yeah. So, William, how can our listeners get in touch with you or find out about the work that you do?
Yeah, if anybody wants to get in contact, my website is kind of a lengthy address, but it's easy to remember. It's Central Ohio UFO Reporting Center, and it's .us.
Okay.
So all one big word. And at the bottom of my homepage, and well, every page on the website, it's got the icon you can click to go to the Facebook page that I started.
And that's the
or
same
you
name?
Can just look up Central Ohio UFO Reporting Center on Facebook, and you'll find it as well.
Well,
and that's the best way to contact me.
I'm sure that out of all the listeners, there's got to be somebody out there that's got something that they want a question answered about UFOs or something they've seen. So I'm hoping that everybody will get this info and contact you and try to figure it out.
And I want to let all the listeners know as well, it doesn't matter where you're from. I mean, I happen to be in Central Ohio, so hence the name, but it doesn't matter. Like I say, I've done cases from Michigan, so wherever you're at in the country or anywhere. Now, if you're out of the state, it may take me a little bit longer to get you an answer, just because I'm not as familiar with the layout of your area, but I can still do it, though. Not a problem. And if you've got a case that even might be something from your childhood, an old case that maybe you're not worried about being solved, but you would like documented. And I also do that for archival records and use those in future cases if need be. And something I want to let everyone know as well, I put all cases basically word for word as it's submitted to me right on the website, but confidentiality is my number one thing. The only editing to your story I would do is any names or addresses, if you would put that in there, exact locations. I leave all that out.
Okay.
So
that's good to know.
You fill out the report on the site, it's got separate spots for the personal information and then the description of your event, and the description is what I actually post. All the other stuff completely confidential.
That's wonderful. And before we go, I'm going to kind of put you on the spot a little bit. What is the most craziest or far out there or comical case you've ever been involved in or heard of? I put you on the spot.
There's been a few that have just... The most far out there one that I have dealt with, and I was actually part UFO, part Bigfoot case. It was just so beyond anything that I had ever, looked into, that I passed it off to actually a Bigfoot researcher, because I just didn't know what to really do with it when people are interacting with these different creatures and feeding them and saying that, they can call these UFOs and things like on command.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I'm a little bit like, suspicious of those type of stories.
Two things kind of overlapping each other.
Yeah,
that was a very out there type of thing that I really wasn't expecting it to take the turn that it did.
Yeah, I think if I were in your shoes, I would have passed that case on to someone else as well.
And there is a thing in the UFO community, well, the Bigfoot community as well, that I don't understand, but nobody's really put an answer out there. But if you believe in Bigfoot, the Bigfoot community, that's fine. But I know people in that community that will call you a nut for believing in UFOs.
Yeah.
And the UFO community will do the same about Bigfoot.
Yeah.
The two groups really don't get along too well.
They don't gel.
Not really see eye to eye. So when you get somebody that's dealing with both of them,
Yeah.
it's like, you really don't know what to think. And whereas I deal with UFO cases, and then I get some of this other stuff thrown in, it really catches me off guard.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Well, if they really want some craziness, they need to follow the Paranormal Road.
Yeah.
But I've definitely had some interesting and almost comical cases come through. I'll give one case that I got. The lady was almost embarrassed once. She figured it out on her own with a little bit of my help. She was seeing an object in the sky, and it ended up being Sirius, the brightest star in the sky, which I figured that much out. But she said it's crackling, making like a fire sound, like popping and cracking. And I thought, are you hearing this, or after you play the video back on your phone? Well, I don't hear it till I play the video back. So my first thought was, maybe she's got a cheap cell phone case that's, making some noises and the microphone's picking it up. So I said, set your phone up, record it, and we'll go from there, but don't touch your phone at all. Well, she messages me back a day or two later and says, I figured it out and I feel kind of dumb. And I said, well, what was it? Her neighbor was doing laundry and it was something clanging in the dryer. her phone picked it up.
Yeah, that is funny.
So that's one of them kind of interesting, comical things, but
Yeah.
I made her feel not so bad after the fact. I was like, hey, it happened.
Right.
You didn't know what it was. You reached out. Between the two of us, we figured it out, and not a big deal. So she felt better after the fact.
Yeah, there's a big difference of laughing with someone or laughing at them, and
that's one of my tactics I try to use when I can. If it's something like that, to where I feel that, man, I really don't want to tell them that's what it is, because I don't want to insult the person and make them feel that way.
Right.
So I try to put out enough clues so that they figure that part out on their own. Try to make it very easy as possible to figure those little things out, because sometimes you'll get stuff and it's very obvious, or they'll hear a noise and it's just, the clip off their flag, banging on a flagpole, and they're thinking it's the object they're looking at making noises.
Right.
So, and sometimes I can figure that out, but like I say, I don't want to insult anybody or make them think that they're dumb, or I don't ever want to come across that way.
Right.
So I try to just give enough clues to where they can figure that out without me directly telling them. I go an indirect way about it.
Well, that's
you
the way
really got to know how to handle people.
Right. Well, William, I cannot tell you enough how it was a pleasure to talk to you tonight.
It was incredible. Really good stories.
I really enjoyed talking with William.
Yeah, that was really interesting stuff that he had there.
I think he's what I really like about his approach is that he genuinely I can feel the compassion in him, that he wants to help people, wants to get them answers. And I like the fact that he really tries to, I hate using the term debunk, but he tries to come up with logical explanations and does his best. And he seems like he has a pretty good success rate of finding out exactly what it is these people saw and actually getting them answers.
And not just for, the popularity, jump right into every case stating, oh yeah, that's definitely a UFO.
Yeah, I think he, in my opinion, really comes across as a person with very high integrity, and it was an honor and pleasure to have him on the show. And speaking of on the show, if you have had a paranormal experience, crossed paths with a cryptid, had a UFO encounter, or anything otherworldly that you would like to share and be on our show, reach out to us. You can reach our program director at podcast.com or evpmediums.com. That's podcast at evpmediums.com.
Also, follow us on Facebook. We have our Paranormal Road page and also EVP Mediums page.
And be sure to join us next week when we talk about the legends of Gore Orphanage. If you're from the local area in Ohio, up in north in Ohio, everybody has heard of Gore Orphanage. And as a teenager growing up, just about everybody has probably made a trip out there.
And myself only one time, not as a teenager, and not so sure I want to go back.
Yeah, it's a creepy place. So we're going to separate the facts from fiction next week on Paranormal Road.